Hello, my friend. Welcome to your sleep story. My name is Stephen Dalton. I'm an Irish storyteller, and it's my great privilege to be the voice that you listen to as you go to sleep tonight. Tonight it's another episode of my boring series. Don't worry if you haven't heard any others. They all stand alone, and tonight you will hear about the most boring school in the world. I must tell you in advance that this is an incredibly boring place. So boring, you may find it difficult to stay awake and listen to just how unbelievably boring both the school and everyone in it actually is. I really hope you like it. Okay, let's do the relaxation session now, which will take a few minutes before tonight's sleep story. I'm going to count down from 10 to 1, and as I do, allow yourself to let go more and more. 10. Feel the support of the bed beneath you, or the floor, or whatever you lie upon tonight. And beneath what you lie upon, feel a deeper support. The support of the earth, our home, our constant support. And as you become aware of that support, see if you can sink into this moment a little more now. Just let go. A little more now. 9. You are safe. Allow my voice to be an anchor of safety tonight. To be a friend. To be a gentle guide. A guide that only ever brings you to safe places. To warm and cozy places. To places that enable and support your sleep. Trust that my voice is a friend tonight. Eight. Feel into your body now. Notice where you might still be holding tonight. Notice where you may have pain or tingling or tension. Notice anything. Maybe you feel something in your feet or in your lower legs or your thighs or your belly, your chest, shoulders, arms, hands. Or maybe you're like me and you hold tension in your face. Just see if you can soften a little now. This is a time for kindness to yourself and to your body. 7. The day is done. Whatever has been, has been. Whatever will be, will be. But right now, all you have is this moment. Your thoughts can't change what has gone before. Your thoughts can't change what will come tomorrow. Your brain needs rest now. So, as thoughts come and go now, don't fight them. Don't chase them away. See them for what they are. Thoughts. Then just watch them go, like leaves floating away on a moonlit river, or clouds passing through a starlit sky. Six. This is your moment. This is your time. You have earned this moment of kindness to yourself. You deserve to have peace in your life. We all do. So, as you become aware of that fact, as you come to the understanding that we all deserve peace, see if you can settle into this moment a little more now, letting your body know that it's really time for rest. Five. Peace lives within you. It is a constant friend, waiting to be found, waiting to be felt. Where does it live within you? Maybe it's in your heart. Maybe it's in your head. It's up to you to find it. But I promise you it's there. 4. Perhaps allow a little gratitude now. Gratitude for the simple things, for your body, for the shelter you have tonight, for the ones you love and who love you, for the beauty and wonder of this world, of this planet, that you can find when you look for it. Three, begin to engage with your imagination now. Begin to see the most boring looking school you can possibly conceive. There's nothing distinguishing about it, nothing that makes you remember it. It's raining, and it's another boring day. 2. Checking in with your body one more time now. Finding the places you are holding still, and allowing yourself to give in, to allow the tension to ease away. Your body has worked hard for you today. It's time to give it rest. And 1, completely letting go now, as I tell you tonight's sleep story. At 22 minutes before 8 in the morning, Mr. Alan Pritchard unlocked the front door of a school called Northfield Secondary School. Mr. Pritchard had been unlocking this door every weekday since September 2003, which meant that by this particular Tuesday he had performed the task approximately 4,900 times, though he had never calculated the exact number because he felt it would encourage unnecessary excitement. He placed the key into the lock and turned it slightly. The door opened with the quiet sound that doors tend to make when they have opened in the same manner for many years. Mr. Pritchard stepped inside the building. The lights in the corridor came on, one section at a time. It was raining outside. Northfield Secondary School was widely known, though not officially advertised, as the most boring school in the world. This was not because the school did anything wrong. On the contrary, everything at Northfield happened exactly as planned. The corridors were long and painted a color that might best be described as administrative beige. The floors were polished linoleum. Along the walls hung several notice boards displaying information about things that had already happened. Mr. Pritchard walked down the main corridor, carrying a folder containing the attendance sheets for Year 9 Geography. 14 minutes past 8, the caretaker, Mrs. Doyle, arrived through the side entrance. Mrs. Doyle was a short woman with grey hair and a set of keys that jingled quietly as she walked. "Morning, Alan," she said. "Morning," Mr. Pritchard replied. They both looked down the corridor. Nothing had happened yet. Mrs. Doyle nodded approvingly. "Yes," she said. At 7 minutes before 8, the first classroom lights came on. Room B14 belonged to Mr. Leonard Whittaker, who taught history. Mr. Whittaker was a tall man with very straight posture and a voice that travelled through the air at the same speed and tone, regardless of the topic. He placed his briefcase on the desk. He then wrote the date on the whiteboard. Tuesday. He underlined it once. Then he sat and opened a book titled Agricultural Developments in Western Europe, 1650 to 1720. He turned to page 143. At 1 minute past 8, the first students arrived. Year 9 entered room B14 and sat down in rows. There were 23 students. They sat in chairs that had been arranged into 4 extremely sensible columns. Mr. Whittaker stood up. "Good morning," he said, in a voice that contained exactly the same amount of enthusiasm it had contained yesterday. The students replied, "Good morning." Mr. Whittaker turned toward the board. "Today," he began slowly, "we will be examining crop rotation." He paused. Then he added with complete seriousness, "Specifically, the 3-field system." At 6 minutes past 8, Mr. Whittaker stood beside the whiteboard and drew a large circle. Inside the circle, he wrote the word field. He then divided the circle into 3 equal sections. The class watched this happen. "During the Middle Ages," Mr. Whittaker said, in a voice that travelled through the classroom at a steady and dependable speed, "farmers began dividing their land into 3 parts. He labelled the first section wheat, the second section barley, the third section he labelled left empty. He stepped back from the board. Several students leaned forward slightly, which was the most visible reaction the classroom produced that morning. The classroom itself had a particular stillness that had developed over many years. Room B14 contained 23 desks, each desk holding one exercise book, one pen, and occasionally a ruler placed at a slight angle that suggested someone had been measuring something earlier in the week. The windows looked out onto a narrow school field. On the field stood 2 football goals and a bench that had once been painted green, but now appeared to be considering retirement. Rain fell steadily against the glass. Inside the room, the fluorescent lights hummed quietly. At 8:12 a.m., Mr. Whittaker continued speaking. If a farmer planted wheat in the same field every year, he explained, the soil would become... What is it? What is it? Tired, that's it, tired. He paused to allow the class to consider the emotional state of the soil. So, he continued, the farmers rotated the crops. He pointed to the circle. Wheat one year, a pause. Barley the next year, another pause. And in the 3rd year, the field rested. He placed the pen down on the desk. The class wrote this into their notebooks. Several students underlined the word rested, though none of them felt particularly strong about it. At 18 minutes past 8, a student named Oliver Grant raised his hand. Oliver was a quiet boy who sat in the 3rd row and had spent most of the morning writing very neat notes about soil. Yes, Oliver, Mr. Whittaker said. Oliver spoke carefully. Did the fields enjoy resting? The class turned slightly toward him. Mr. Whittaker considered the question. The historical records, he said slowly, do not express a clear opinion. Oliver nodded. He wrote this down. Across the corridor, room B12 contained the mathematics class taught by Mrs. Harding. Mrs. Harding was a woman with a calm voice and a methodical approach to numbers. At this moment, she was writing the number 48 on the board. 48, she said. She paused. Can be divided by 6. The class watched. She wrote the answer underneath. 8, she confirmed. The class wrote this down with the steady determination of people who understood that numbers would continue existing, whether they hurried or not. Back in room B14, Mr. Whittaker had begun describing crop yields in 1683. He walked slowly across the front of the classroom, with the same book open in his hands. The rain continued outside. 23 students wrote notes about farming techniques that had been developed more than 300 years earlier. The fluorescent lights hummed softly above them still. And at Northfield Secondary School, the morning had settled into its usual pace. At 17 minutes past 9, the principal of Northfield Secondary School was sitting alone in his office. His name was Mr. Bernard Collingwood, and he had been the principal for 11 years, 4 months, and 9 days, though he rarely mentioned the exact figure, unless someone specifically asked, which almost no one did. Mr. Collingwood was a tall man with neatly combed grey hair, and a tie that he adjusted approximately once every 40 minutes, whether it needed adjusting or not. At this moment, he was looking at his desk. The desk contained several items that Mr. Collingwood believed benefited from occasional attention. There was a stapler. There was a pencil holder containing 5 pencils, all sharpened to a point that suggested readiness, but not urgency. There was a small stack of papers titled Term Attendance Overview, and there was a paper clip. Mr. Collingwood looked at the paper clip. Then he picked it up and placed it slightly closer to the stapler. He sat back. This arrangement felt more balanced. At 9:22, Mr. Collingwood opened the top drawer of the desk. Inside were 12 spare paper clips. He counted them. This took a little time because he counted them twice, which he considered a responsible administrative practice. 12, he said quietly to himself. He closed the drawer. Then he opened it again briefly, just to confirm. 12, he repeated. He closed the drawer once more. The principal's office was a calm and orderly room. Behind Mr. Collingwood's desk hung a framed photograph of the school building, taken in 1998, when the building looked almost exactly as it did now. Beside the photograph was a notice board displaying several memos. One memo reminded teachers to return library books promptly. Another memo encouraged students to walk calmly in the corridors. Mr. Collingwood stood up and straightened the second memo by approximately half a centimeter. he sat down again. At 34 minutes past 9, Mr. Collingwood opened a small notebook labeled Daily Observations. He wrote a new entry. 9:34. Paper clips accounted for. He paused thoughtfully. Then he added another note. Stapler alignment improved. He closed the notebook. Outside his office door, the school continued functioning with its usual dependable rhythm. Students wrote notes about crop rotation. Mrs. Harding continued discussing the number 48. The rain continued. Mr. Collingwood folded his hands on the desk and looked at the stapler again, just to make sure it remained where he had placed it. At 17 minutes before 11, the bell rang for morning break. The bell itself was not especially loud. It had been installed in 1996 and had since rung at exactly the same volume every day, which the staff appreciated. Classroom doors opened along the corridor. Students stepped out in small, orderly groups. Northfield students had developed a reputation over the years for conducting their breaks in a manner that could best be described as methodically uneventful. They walked. They occasionally stopped walking. Then they walked again. At 10:45, the main corridor slowly filled with students. Most of them were holding snacks that had been brought from home. There were apples. There were small containers of yogurt. There were several sandwiches wrapped carefully in paper towels. Two boys named Ethan and Callum stood beside a notice board discussing a biscuit. Ethan held the biscuit. "I think it's oat," Ethan said. Callum examined it. "Yes," he agreed after a moment. They both considered the biscuit for several seconds before Ethan took a bite. Callum nodded thoughtfully. At 10:48, in the courtyard outside, several students were standing beside the bicycle rack. One girl named Sophie was reading the back of a juice carton. The carton explained that the juice had been made from concentrate. Sophie read this information twice. Nearby, a boy named Daniel was looking at a pigeon. The pigeon was standing on the fence. It did not appear to be doing anything in particular. Daniel continued observing it. Inside the building, 3 students stood near the vending machine. The vending machine contained several items: plain crisps, slightly salted crisps, a chocolate bar described on the wrapper as classic. One student pressed the button for the crisps. The machine made a mechanical sound. A packet of crisps fell into the tray. All three students watched this happen. "Yes," one of them said quietly. "Crisps." At 3 minutes before the bell, the courtyard had reached its most active point of the morning. One student was finishing a banana. 2 others were discussing homework that had already been completed. Near the wall, a boy named Oliver Grant was reading a leaflet about local recycling guidelines that he had found in his bag. He underlined a sentence with his finger. The sentence explained the correct way to dispose of cardboard. Oliver nodded. The bell rang again. At 11 o'clock, the students returned to their classrooms. Chairs were pulled out. Books were opened. Mr. Whittaker stood once again at the front of room B14. He cleared his throat. "Now," he said calmly, "before the break, we were discussing barley." The class prepared their pens. Outside, the rain continued. At 18 minutes past 11, while the students were back in their classrooms and the teachers were continuing their very dependable lessons, the school janitor was standing in a corridor beside a mop bucket. His name was Mr. Dennis Kavanagh. Mr. Kavanagh had been the janitor at Northfield Secondary School for 17 years and 3 days, during which time he had developed a careful and thoughtful relationship with the building's floors. At this particular moment, he was examining a small patch of linoleum near the lockers. The floor was clean, but Mr. Kavanagh believed floors benefited from occasional reflection. He leaned slightly closer. "Yes," he said quietly. The floor remained floor. At 11:21, Mr. Kavanagh dipped the mop into the bucket. He lifted it out again. He waited for the water to drip back into the bucket in a calm and responsible way. Then he began mopping a section of the corridor that had already been mopped earlier that morning, but which he felt might appreciate another pass. The mop moved slowly, from left to right, then right to left. Mr. Kavanagh was employing his tried and tested method of mopping, one which he veered from slightly in 2014 but quickly realized that the method he had learned from his predecessor was by far the superior mopping method. Mr. Kavanagh watched the floor very carefully. There are people who mop floors quickly. Mr. Kavanagh was not one of them. At 11:26, and halfway down the corridor, he stopped and looked at a small scuff mark beside the wall. The scuff mark had been there since approximately Tuesday of the previous week. Mr. Kavanagh crouched down. He examined it with the steady attention of someone who had spent a considerable amount of time examining floors. He rubbed it once with the cloth. The scuff mark lightened slightly. Mr. Kavanagh stood up again. "Yes," he said. From inside room B14, Mr. Whittaker's voice could be heard through the door. "And the barley crop, as we mentioned earlier, followed the wheat crop in the rotation." Mr. Kavanagh paused with the mop. He listened for a moment. He nodded. Barley made sense after wheat. He continued mopping. At 36 minutes past 11, Mr. Kavanagh wheeled the mop bucket slowly toward the staff room. Inside the bucket were 2 cleaning cloths, the mop, and a small sponge that had been used for several years and now had a philosophical appearance. Mr. Kavanagh stopped outside the staff room door. He checked the sign beside it. The sign read, "Staff room." He read it again. Then he opened the door and parked the bucket just inside, where it could consider the room quietly, while the rest of the school carried on learning about crop rotation. At 17 minutes past 12, the bell rang for lunch. The bell had rung for lunch at the same time every school day for many years, and the students responded with the calm reliability that had come to define Northfield Secondary School. Classroom doors opened. Students walked into the corridor in small, sensible groups. There was no rushing. Northfield was not a rushing school. At 12:21, the cafeteria was filling gradually. It was a large rectangular room containing 24 tables. Lunch at Northfield tended to consist of dependable foods. There was soup. There were sandwiches. There was a tray of pasta that had been described by the cafeteria manager as perfectly adequate. A boy named Daniel sat down with a sandwich and a yogurt. Across from him, Oliver Grant was reading the ingredients on a carton of milk. The carton explained that the milk had been pasteurized. Oliver read this with interest. At table 7, 2 students were discussing geography homework. "Did you finish the worksheet?" one asked. "Yes," replied the other. "What did you put for question 4? "I wrote river." The first student considered this. "Yes," he said. "That's what I wrote." They both ate their sandwiches. At 12:36, near the window, the pigeon from earlier returned to the fence outside. Several students noticed it. One of them nodded. The pigeon remained where it was. Inside the cafeteria, a student finished a banana. Another student folded a napkin very neatly. Lunch continued in a steady and uncomplicated way. At exactly 1 o'clock, the bell rang again. Students stood up from the tables. Chairs moved back under the tables, and all the students walked back into the corridors. Lessons resumed. By 12 minutes past 2, the afternoon had developed its usual rhythm. In room B14, Mr. Whittaker was explaining crop storage techniques. The class wrote this down. In mathematics, Mrs. Harding had moved from the number 48 to 54, which she explained could be divided by several useful numbers. Students wrote this down as well. In the corridor, Mr. Kavanagh, the janitor, examined another section of floor and concluded that it remained acceptable. Outside, the rain continued. At 3:30, the final bell rang. Students packed their bags. Books closed. Chairs slid under desks. Mr. Whittaker closed the history book. "That concludes today's lesson," he said, in the same steady voice he had used all day. Students stood up and left the classroom. They walked toward the exit. Some discussed homework. Others discussed what they might have for dinner. One student was still thinking about the pigeon. Mr. Kavanagh wheeled the mop bucket slowly down the corridor for a final inspection of the floor. The principal, Mr. Collingwood, straightened the stapler on his desk once more before leaving his office. At 49 minutes past 3, the school building became quiet again. Classrooms stood neatly arranged. Desks waited for tomorrow. The notice boards continued displaying information about things that had already happened. Outside, the rain fell steadily on the empty playground. Northfield Secondary School had completed another day exactly as it had planned to.